My earliest recollection with my mother was my mother saying repeatedly as I was growing up, "You were supposed to be a little girl." I had wanted Kathy Ann. Well, I had an older sister and I had an older brother, so this never made sense to me and always made me feel that somehow as a boy I didn't measure up. I wasn't what my mother had wanted. But with the overstepped boundaries with my mother, I think inside I viewed women as unsafe. When I became a Christian at age 19, there was absolutely no desire at all to pursue a relationship with a woman. I had ceased acting out homosexually, but had almost resigned myself to a celibate life at that juncture. I think a lot of the damage that was done, I pushed behind a door and locked the door. I didn't actually open that up regarding my mother until I was about 40 years old. And it rose to the surface because of a number of events in my life that propelled me into therapy for about a 2-year period to open the door up, to look at those things, to finally voice the pain, the suffering as a child. My mother had bathed me past puberty. My mother knew no boundaries growing up, and my mother really knew no boundaries in the context of my early marriage to my wife. So part of the healing was understanding the reality of what actually happened in my life growing up, of being able to identify what was healthy and what was very unhealthy, of gaining a new conception of how to structure my relationship with my mother. Things that were okay for her to talk about or not talk about, ways of relating to me physically that made me uncomfortable. So I set boundaries into my relationship with my wife, with my mother, that were very freeing for me. I was part of the hippie era and had been on drugs, practically every kind of drug available, for a 4.5-year period of time. I had been a semi-professional rock musician. I had been involved in the occult, and at age 19 had a near-death experience from drugs. I had run to the home of a local pastor and explained my situation. I had known his family. He took me to the ER. He and his wife spent the evening with me there throughout the night, kind of monitoring how things were going. And it was the next day that he sat down and shared the gospel with me. The gospel penetrated my heart. And his oldest son had been my best friend and had been in the gay life. We had not had a relationship together, but both of us realized that was an issue in our lives, homosexuality. In the gospel penetrating my heart and in coming to Christ, I think I realized from the outset that homosexual acting out was wrong. It was condemned by God. It didn't change my feelings. It didn't change my attractions. Those were still there, as strong as ever. So for me, that necessarily meant I would have to live a celibate life. I quit using drugs. I quit drinking. I quit acting out sexually. Over the course of 3 years, I had 2 young pastors who were just God's gift to me. One of them was very perceptive, very wise, and I think rightly understood from the outset that I had father hunger in my life, that I did not have good relationships with men, and those 2 men provided that for me and really helped me to begin to grow. I developed a growing friendship with my wife, Sherry, and after about 3.5 years, God took me by surprise. And I realized that the feelings that I had for her, the depth of commitment I had to the relationship was love. When I talk about Sherry, I didn't fall in love with her. I grew in love with her. And then suddenly realized after 3 years, I didn't want to live life without her. And God had really been doing a work in my heart. And we were married in 1975. The wedding was all planned, and I asked her, do you think it would be possible to maybe put this back 2 or 3 months? She was blown out of the water, immediately scheduled time with our pastor, and he knew exactly the reason. So I was encouraged to sit down with Sherry, tell her about my background, and fully anticipated that she would look at me square in the eyes and say, I can't handle this. I'm out of here. The opposite happened. She had tears streaming down her face, and she looked at me and she said, Ken, I'm not concerned about the past. I'm not concerned about what's happened in the past. I'm concerned about who you are today and where you want to go in the future. And most importantly, if you love me. And tears started flowing for me. We hugged each other, and 2 weeks later we were married.
Your passion that beats for Christ alone. Your passion.
On our wedding night, one of my greatest anxieties in getting married, and part of the reason why I took a step back and wanted to perhaps go 6 months more before we got married, was the fear of not being able to fulfill her. The fear of not having the kind of physical response for her that would be appropriate in marriage. That I loved her was not an issue. My fears and anxieties were very powerful. The only thing that I knew to do was that evening we knelt beside our bed before we went to bed together. And we prayed and said, Lord, you're the one who has created our bodies. You're the one who made us male and female in your image. You're the one that created our sexuality as something that's good and blessed and is a gift. We invite you to be smack dab in the middle of our lovemaking and to teach us how to be good lovers to one another. I won't go into detail about our evening together. I will say that as we lay there in bed afterwards, the tears were flowing down my face because I had never experienced anything so holy, anything so joyous, anything so full of peace and health and goodness. There was no self-hatred. There was no sense of filth and dirtiness. There were no regrets. There was no sense of evil present. I had goose flesh. It was something totally unlike anything I had ever experienced before, and God blessed. My heart today in ministry, after all these years of counseling and working with people, remains much the same as it was early on, and that's that God would take the pain and the suffering that was in my life, take the stuff of my life like a loaf of bread and break it and give it to hungry people.
Ken Paris is a man who knows firsthand the damage that is done to a child by a people and a culture that practice and promote sexual immorality. Did you know that your children in grade school and up are being indoctrinated into the idea that homosexuality is good and healthy? Did you know that some public school curricula actually force children to watch videos that promote the gay lifestyle? In some classes, they are even forced to listen to graphic descriptions of perverted gay sex practices and encouraged to experiment on their own. We are destroying our children, both in the womb and in our school systems, as well as through the media. Any enterprising 5-year-old can access the most perverted and graphic pornography ever created by the mind of man. We send it right into their homes, into their libraries, and into their schools. Jesus had some rather strong words for those who would cause a child to stumble. Don't think that this generation will escape God's wrath for what we are doing to our children. For those of you who have already been damaged by the evil that runs rampant in our culture, there is hope. Jesus came to seek and to save those who are lost. He came to heal the brokenhearted and to set free the captive. Your homosexual confusion or sex addiction or other perverse attraction and behavior is not too hard for Him to defeat. He simply needs a willing subject. He needs someone who is genuinely sorry for their sinful lifestyle and who is willing to turn away and leave it forever. He is looking for someone who wants to be redeemed, healed, and transformed by His power rather than by their own power. If you are that person, He is standing at the door of your heart right now, knocking. Let Him in. Let Him deliver you from the sentence of death that you've been under, and take the reins of your life. Let Him heal you from your brokenness and lead you into the way of everlasting life. That's why He came to earth as Jesus Christ and let them crucify Him. He did it for you because He loves you. No, you didn't deserve it. Neither did I. That's the love of God. It's of another world and on another plane altogether. If you'd like more resources for this new walk out of darkness and into God's marvelous light, visit us at purepassion.us. And Lord willing, we'll see you here next week.